Hello everyone, this is Amelia Rose, and welcome back to Writing in Chaos. I believe that's what I named the series. I really hope it is. Um, and this episode will be about just kind of general world building. I covered some of it in my character creation, because that is part of world building. So if you want to see more just specifically on how to build the characters, go to episode 2. But this one is all about just world building that should be put down in notes, even if you're kind of just bullshitting your way through writing. Which, fun fact, is how it's always done. But the setting, it starts on August 15, 2012, and I don't have an end date. But, and this is for both books, because this is going to have a sequel. But, Jesus, I just ran into my closet. But August 15, 2012, and this book will end sometime August 2014. But we'll pick up, and the, epilogue of the second book will be closer to our time. Um, it's when it starts, they're in Albany, New York, and later they are near Dawsonville, Georgia, which is a town in the Appalachian Mountains or near it. But Ainsley and Luke are 15 when it starts, 16, 17 when it ends. Jonathan is 15 when story starts, 16, 17 when it ends. Carden's, so they're all the same age, like they would be the same class, but Carden's birthday has already passed at this point. So he is 16 when the story starts, 17, 18 when it ends, and Serena's 15 like the others. Now, right here, you can see the almost route that they'll travel. I don't think the dot I have is anywhere near Dawsonville. In fact, I'm pretty sure it would be more up here somewhere, because I think this is where the mountain range is, closer to the state line. But I just got a map of the US. Started in Albany, and I looked, how long would it take to, shut up phone, how long would it take to travel there? Currently, stupid emails. But it would take 15 minutes, Jesus, 15 hours, 24 minutes without stopping, but with breaks, and they'd have to take a lot for Luca, which I'll explain more in a little bit. It would take roughly 20 hours to drive there. And that's not accounting for traffic or anything. In fact, I might have it take like 2 or 3 days for them to get there, stopping at campsites. Again, most of it has to do with Luca, which I'll explain a little later. And one thing that they do bring up in the book, because they don't have a lot of money, is how much would it cost to drive there? And so using a kind of general truck model for Ainsley, because she has a truck, I looked up average gas price, which was $3.62. Lucky fuckers. And it would have taken roughly 58.76 gallons to drive from Albany, New York to Dawsonville, Georgia, which would have been $212.72. That is something that gets brought up. I might have that number lower or higher, um, depending on if I get very specific on when they stop. I'm not sure if I will, but this will just be average later if I need to bring it up. So this is important background for the group. I do kind of go over this in my character creation video because it's important background for the characters, but it's pretty much they're all orphans or were abandoned. Only Ainsley, Luca, and I think Jonathan and Evelyn know anything about their families. I don't believe Carden and Serena do, but they were all in the foster care system and they all went to the same school. Carden and Serena were in a different group home than the other four, but they didn't have a lot. They didn't know what they were doing. But as it says here, when Ainsley and Luca were 11, Ainsley managed to save money from random jobs she managed to get and selling things at markets to buy a kind of broken down trailer. It was literally just kind of the shell. There were no indoor walls or plumbing or a floor. It was a very shady deal. And she managed to rent a backyard space in a shady area. But she worked odd jobs. Evelyn worked odd jobs, and so did Jonathan. And Luca was at the trailer fixing up as best he could. The four all moved in there, and Carden and Serena eventually moved in as well. And in 2011, so a year before the story starts, they petitioned for full emancipation, legal, medical, everything, where they could stay in school, drop out if they wanted. And they've all finished early. And the court granted the order for emancipation, and I know it's more complicated than this and probably wouldn't have happened. But these were, this is kind of inspired by the fact that a lot of foster kids slip through the cracks. There'll be records of them one year, and then the next year they're out of the system somehow. They don't know, but um, the court, when going over their case, realized no one reported their absence. They hadn't been counted for in their group home or in their school for a couple years at that point, for roughly 2 or 3 years. It just never got reported. They weren't living in a good area, they didn't go to a good school. Um, but they they never got reported, so the court was like, whatever, sure. Ainsley did have to move, but Carden and Serena eventually managed to get a small apartment together. It's just a studio. And they have all finished high school through summer school. They all essentially went as long as they could and were given a certificate of completion and are allowed to work with it. Certificate of completion is what I had when I graduated, because if I remember correctly, and I hope I did because it's what I put on my college application, I graduated in June, but I had finished my work in March. So how they get to the cabin? um, Carden had a grandma he didn't know about. She passed away, left everything to Carden. All the tax stuff gets figured out beforehand, and he has the farm now, and so he brings it up and is pretty much like, it has a house. We can stay together. There's enough land. So they all agree to do it, and they go at the start of November. So they go right before and kind of right as the snow starts. So Ainsley and Evelyn live in the trailer right next to the house. There's no indoor plumbing. There is a sink outside, but it doesn't really work in the winter. And an outhouse way in the corner. Ainsley does have a small bathroom in the trailer, which is kind of what they use in the winter, especially Luca, because he can't get to the outdoor bathroom. Um, there are solar panels, water is on a well, and Evelyn and Carden are very crafty, and they actually do end up making water collectors for garden and laundry. And it's big part of their story is the fact they managed to create all of it pretty much by themselves. Property tax is another shit because it is gonna come up at some point. Um, I found a property tax from 2012, which was $1,063. And I looked up the minimum wage in Georgia, which was $7.65. Ainsley's gonna end up working at a diner. And this is monthly, and it's kind of just a rough estimate. And as I put here, I'm not accounting for taxes. I don't care. I don't give a fuck. I'm too tired. But Ainsley would make roughly nine. So her actual take home that she would know would be roughly 979, and then tips would vary. Luca does write. He writes articles for the local newspaper, which would be 459. Evelyn does odd jobs, which would bring home anywhere from 300 to 400, but she doesn't have a set job. Now with Jonathan, he had a very sketchy boss. It's brought up in the first chapter, first couple pages, but Jonathan's boss was involved with a gang um, that mainly dealt in car theft, pretty much. So Jonathan would get paid extra to stay late on certain days after the mechanic shop closed and fix up stolen cars and make it more difficult for the cops to find those cars. And that was really all he did. But when he brings up to his boss that he's moving, um, his boss gives him one last big job, which is to transport something. He doesn't know what. I know what, but I don't know if I'm going to change that, so I'm not going to say what it is just yet. But to transport something to Georgia, to Dawsonville, and in return, the boss will set him up with a good job that's not sketchy. So he makes $1,000 a month with that because he's only working like 2.5 weeks. Carded works carpentry, 35 hours a week, 4 times a week, and Serena works at a shop, and most of them are part time. But in total, depending especially on how much Evelyn makes, they make roughly 46.30 or 47.30 a month. And later it does come up because so I don't know if property tax is yearly or monthly. I'll have to look that up. But they got property taxes. There's stuff at the house they have to fix. Serena wants to go to college to be a cook, so they've got to save up for that. Um, and Luca's medication as well. He has a autoimmune disorder, and I apologize if I pronounce this wrong, but it's myasthenia gravis. Um, Typically, it only shows up in people 30 to 50, but it ended up presenting in him when he was roughly 10. He has a mild moderate version, which would be muscle weakness, trouble walking, but it wouldn't be deadly unless, and I'll go through it. I'll click on the link in just a minute. But it would be deadly unless he has a crisis, is what they called it. But that's why he has a wheelchair and crutches and a brace. And there are medications that you need to take for it, so that is something they have to try and figure out. He does have a leg injury, which kind of makes it worse. But there was a bullying incident in the foster home. He got a broken leg when he was a kid, and they only took him to the hospital after it got infected, so he was roughly 8 when that happened. The infection kind of fucked up his muscles and the healing process, and he had to get surgery to fix it, but he now does have a permanent limp, which again makes his autoimmune disorder almost a little worse because there's already muscle weakness that happens with that. Now, here's my source, and it's Cleveland Clinic. Um, but with him having, so he's the autoimmune type. It generalized, most likely. I haven't actually discovered that. Oops. Um, but he doesn't have really the difficulty speaking or the limited facial expression. He is primarily muscle weakness, fatigue, blurry vision, and trouble walking. Everything else, it's only when it's a very bad sort of day that he ends up getting any of the other symptoms. And even then, it's typically very mild. Um, where is it? But here are the complications. Um, the mental ones, it can lead to stress and depression. But, uh, shit, I can't pronounce this. Myasthenic crisis. Um, there is a chance he could have that, which is uh one of the plot points for Ainsley. She's constantly worried if her brother's okay and if he's gonna have a crisis, because they were 10 when he got the diagnosis, and it ended up actually kind of scaring the shit out of her, because he's her twin. She doesn't want anything to happen to him. So, oops, you can see what I was playing. Um, but I don't know if I'll have him have one. He's definitely gonna get close to it, but yeah, it's a possibility that's always there. And he has, I think, would be either class 2 or class 3. Um, Possibly class 4, but I think it would be more towards class 3 because most of the time he can walk. It's only after he's been doing a lot of physical labor that he ends up needing his wheelchair or needing his crutches unless there's a bad day. And I'm going to try to do more research on just certain types of treatments because like they wouldn't do surgery and they wouldn't be able to do a lot of this, but medications he would be able to have and get. Especially, oh my god, I'm yawning. But he might be on immunosuppressants or inhibitors, and that might mess with him. Um, and they can't necessarily go to a doctor to get help. They can't afford it. They don't have health insurance. And so when it says, like right here, talk to your healthcare provider before starting a program, they're not able to do that, which can cause problems later on down the line. And it's difficult for them. But this is kind of how world building can go. Luca has an entire slide because there's a lot of issues that arise from his condition. Um, if money's going to be an issue, put it on a slide. A lot of background stuff. I love my map. I'm so proud of my map. But that's just how world building can go. And sometimes it can be, I'm not gonna lie, it can be a right old bitch to do. I spent about an hour or so just trying to find an autoimmune disorder that kind of fit what I was trying to write Luca as, but also one that wasn't so complicated or so deadly that I wouldn't be able to write it properly. I wouldn't be able to do do it justice. With this one, his main symptoms could also be symptoms from a leg injury, or he could just have a shit immune system. But I wanted to give it a proper diagnosis, and I found one. Originally, he was going to have MS, and then I looked at it and realized that is not at all what I originally thought it was, so I didn't write it. And yeah, it takes a lot of research if you're going to go this deep with it, but it can be important. It can be needed if it's going to be a plot point later, so you don't have to get to that scene and realize, oh shit, I don't know how to do this. I don't know what I'm looking for. You can then, you can just go to a slide. But that'll be all for this episode. Let me know if you have any questions. I will do my best to answer them. I apologize if I'm talking too fast. I get nervous when recording these. Um, oh no, my fake tattoo's coming off. But I get nervous when recording these. I always do. I don't know why. But stay safe. Have a lovely day. I will see you guys next time. Bye.